so struck. She said, let's take action. And she got on the phone and said, can we do this peace vigil? And I said, let's do it. And so I want to thank her. Part of what moved her was the tragic and sudden death of Xavier Louis Jean back in April. Shortly after his murder, Harmony reached out and said, what are we going to do? How can we organize? How can we pull this all together? How can we stand in front of City Hall and raise our hearts, our heads, and our minds, and wrap it around the idea of peace and nonviolence? She wanted to say, how do we all gather together, particularly those that have been the victims of that violence? And you will hear from those individuals very shortly. How do we gather everyone together to stand and let the mothers, the families know that we hear and feel that grief? I always say no one, particularly a mother, should ever bury her child. Now I know, because that's my personal story and my personal journey. And even though it was 28 years ago, it was like it was yesterday. So I am so proud and pleased that I can live in a city that we can gather together, that we can hold hands in solidarity, that we can reach out and touch each other and say, your pain and your grief and your sorrow is not just yours to bear, but that we will lift you up. You know, unfortunately in the last several weeks, actually as recent as just 2 days ago, we have heard gunshots fired in the port and more lives are being impacted. And another man from Cambridge, not that long ago, Robert Favreau, needlessly lost his life. I believe all of us are aware of that rally for our youth that took place on the steps last week. And while we know we stood here, we gathered together because it was important. It was important that we got together and demand from our city that we wanted some action, that we wanted peace. But we wanted to take tonight, to take an opportunity to have a moment of reflection, a moment to grieve, a moment to miss those that we have lost, but also a moment to be fortified. So we're coming together this evening to grieve, but to share our basic humanity with one another. It's an important part. It's an important part of the grieving process. Not just for the individuals who have lost someone, but for the entire community. And so Harmony and I both felt it was important that the members of our community come together tonight in the name of healing. Let's all say that together. Healing.
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 Healing. So we have invited Xavier's mom to share a few words with us. We've invited Robert's mom to share a few words with us. And we have asked Denise Cosby, there's more than one Denise, you can never have enough Denises, who has lost her son as well to gun violence some time ago, to share with us. Sadly, these three women represent a far greater number of local families that have lost loved ones. A very good friend of mine that was not just across the street still cannot bear to even talk about the loss of her son and her daughter. We'll also hear from Reverend Brenda Ann Brown from Mass Avenue Baptist Church and Reverend Pastor Ellis Washington from St. Paul AME Church, here to represent the interfaith community. We'll have Brian Core from the Cambridge Police Commission. And just in a moment, you'll hear from my colleagues in public office, Mayor Sumbo Siddiqui, who will invite and acknowledge all the electeds that are present, and from Councilor Mark McGovern, who he and I just chaired a meeting on civic unity and human resources to talk about what are we going to do to stop the violence now. What are we going to do to stop the violence now? But first, before you hear from all those other folks, I'm going to ask Harmony to step to the mic and speak to you. Harmony?
Hi, I'm Harmony Witte. I've lived in Cambridge for 6 years with my husband.
and I'm happy to call it my home. I want to thank you all for making the time to be here today to honor the memories of those community members we have lost to gun violence. A huge thank you to Councilwoman Simmons for taking this on, and to Neil Albert, who worked so hard to put it together. Thank you to all the speakers and the musicians and artists, but most of all, thank you to the families of the victims who bravely stand here today and speak to remind us what precious people we have lost. I hope that from the gathering here there will come a strengthening of the bonds of community, that we will lift one another up in grief and sorrow, in fear and love and hope, and step forward to fight for safer existence for all in Cambridge and our greater community at large. Thank you.
We'll now hear from our Mayor Symbol Siddiqui. Mayor Siddiqui.